was born, the doctors noticed and told his mom right away that his head was abnormally large and that he seemed questionable. He was abnormal. And then grew up a bit and sent to school. And when he was there, the teachers thought he was mentally ill. And they told his mother, and she did not agree. So she withdrew him and homeschooled him. And by all accounts of his behavior, he would have been put in special ed classes today for the behaviorally disordered, where you work especially with children's behavior because it's so off from center, let's put it politely. But his mother must have done a decent job because we know him worldwide today. His name's Thomas Alva Edison, and he was called the Wizard of Menlo Park. He made so many inventions. You know, you can think of the electric light, you can think of the phonograph. Those are the two most famous. However, his behavior was really odd. And he was not your favorite dinner guest, let's put it that way. You know, he is reported to have stolen the idea for the phonograph. He was insanely jealous of his employees if they should go talk to another inventor or share anything that he gave. But when he decided to make the electric light, he said he would do it within 6 weeks. And that seems really, when you think of what he didn't know at the time, it's really amazing length of time. And what was the problem was he didn't know what the filament would be made of, and he was trying different things. And the estimates of what he tried were between 1,600 and 10,000. But finally, you know, all his friends were saying, please stop, you're humiliating yourself. And maybe you've heard this before too. It's not working. You'd be much better off not making a fool of yourself. But every time it's happened, he said, with everything that doesn't work, I know something more about what does. And finally, he found ordinary cotton thread would work, and the light was soon everywhere. Absolutely. But when you think about his behavior, he could really be viewed differently. You don't hear a whole lot about his behavior. How many of you heard how odd he was ever? Uh-huh. Okay, one. Good. But his philosophy was summed up in this statement. He said, everything comes to him who hustles while he waits. And the other thing is luck is 90% perspiration and 10% inspiration. And this is a man who would not accept the word failure. He exemplified what I'm talking about today, which is commitment. Now, Webster's dictionary defines commitment as this: to bind by a promise or a pledge. And we can all agree with that. But interestingly, it is not the first definition. The first definition involves being put away in an institution for the public good. Well, you know, there were certainly those people who thought Edison should be put away for the public good. His behavior was very, very odd. But let's look at what he, you know, they called what he did mighty queerly, mighty strange. But let's look at the other definition of commitment, because that's what I want to talk about, and I hope none of you have to deal with that first definition. Now, to commit, as I talk to you today, is to bind yourself to an idea or an action that you choose to align with. It's very powerful spiritually, and it's a great statement of faith. You know, it involves belief, focus, time, energy, perhaps a whole new way of being. But, you know, it's not going to be business as usual if you want to make a change in your life. Because what you've been doing, obviously, or I've been doing, has not taken you to where we want to go. Now, this is kind of selfish, I guess you'd call it. But selfish is not a bad word. It means to take care of the self. So being selfish in that way is a good thing to do. And we all have something we want, don't we? Regardless of who we are, what we do, how much money we have, if we're in a relationship, have a huge house, or, you know, or living in a tiny house, whatever that is, a state of consciousness. But, there's no cosmic scorekeeper out there saying, you were good and you can have this, you were bad and you can't, or I'm just going to plain out and out just frustrate you and you can't have it just because I don't want you to. There is no cosmic scorekeeper. I used to think that maybe there was. But if someone's not up there taking notes on what you're doing, who you're doing it with, and what body parts you're using, well, what is the job of heaven or spirit? Well, is God out of a job? And I would say no, absolutely not. God or spirit or the intelligence, the energy field that moves through all and creates all, is never unemployed or underemployed, because the God that we know is not a big man in the sky, like I had my image when I was a child, Southern Baptist, and God was about 50 or 60 feet tall, long beard, long hair, kind of grayish, and had on a sandy-colored robe with some leather slippers or sandal, like I should say. And I did not want to think about anything else that might be under that robe, because this was God. Because God wasn't supposed to. Well, it's true. But now, the fact is that that's not an image at all. That's a projection of our culture. That's what religions have, is projections of their cultures. And so you see different forms of the view of God as based on the culture. But, God always says yes when we say yes. And you say, well, I can say the word yes, 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 and that doesn't make me, manifest anything. No, you're right, it doesn't. It's not the fact you are saying the word. It is that you are aligning your entire being with that word, with that concept. And when we match energetically with that, we become a match, and the universe responds. And it doesn't always happen in one big spurt. It can happen as a process. But you and I are God individualized. You and I are intelligence individualized. And what we have is such power to use. We just have to direct it and say yes. Because God doesn't ponder our actions or our conduct grades. This intelligence, if it were like a person, would have a sign on its desk, which, an energy field does not have a sign on its desk, but it would say, in case you forget, whatever the question is, the answer is yes. The answer is yes. And God has said yes to me and yes to you, spirit or intelligence. I don't want to use the word God too often. Some people have a negative connotation, or that big person in the sky, so let's call it intelligence or spirit. This intelligence has been saying yes to you and me every step of the way. So how come we don't have what we want? Where's my stuff? And so the thing is we have to look at what's in our life to see what we've been asking for. Because, this is not a joke. This is true. The spirit, the intelligence, is always responding to us. And, a millionaire works for more, a billionaire works for more. It's not just the money, it's the creative outlet. It's that drive to create. And to not create is in conflict with our very nature, because that's what we do. That's who we are. Our job is thinking into the universe and the universe responding. I don't think that's all of the universe, but that's our part of it. Now, what if we have a conflict in our desires? What if we, well, I want to do this. I don't think it's exactly right. Well, it says in the Bible, as Paul Gagne once said, I've always wanted to say that, the Bible says, if it is written that if God be for us, what can be against us? So again, where's our stuff? And where's the part of our life that's got a blooming career and great love and prosperity and health and good relationships? Well, Ernest Holmes, who founded this teaching, said all thought is creative. All thought is creative, and all comes from thought, the invisible to the visible. So therefore, if we are thinking and it's imagining, that it just outpictures right in front of you, we have to change what we're thinking, don't we, to get something? We have to change what we're thinking. So If you want your life to change, you've got to commit to something different. And I mean really commit to do what it takes on your part. And sometimes I don't want to do that. I just want to think it and poof, it appears. I do. It would be so much easier if the world ran according to my way of thinking. And not for anyone else, but when we put it out there, intelligence just says yes. So therefore, our experience in the past and present are results of our thinking and results of our beliefs. Very often our commitments are not the same as our stated commitments. Have you ever noticed that? Me neither. But it's true, because the spirit, the intelligence, is responding not just to the words we say. I could say bibbity bobbity boo, and no bibbity bobbity boo is going to appear there. But it's what we think and feel. It's how we are emanating the energy from our bodies, from our thoughts. By the way, the energy and wavelength of a thought leaving the brain was photographed some years back by engineers at IBM. So we really are just putting it out there. We have to think about what we really want to think. It's not our job to tell the infinite how to produce it. Have you ever had anybody say, I'd like to have this, and it's going to come looking like this, acting like this, tasting like this, being like this? Well, haven't I just tamped down the flow? Where does that come from? I think it comes from fear of, if I don't do it or it doesn't get done just this way, it's not gonna happen. Or if it happens, it's not gonna be right because I'm smarter than the divine intelligence. It has to be this way. That's the only way it can be to suit me. We just put it out there, and God says, my favorite biblical phrase, yea and verily, which means, oh yeah, times 100. It does. Regardless of what we say we want, we oftentimes don't have it because we're not an energetic match. Perhaps we have something called a secondary agenda. I noticed that myself when I wanted to be healthier, that every time the fertilizer hit the ventilator, I hit the chocolate. It was not a recipe for health, and I was so shocked to think about that. How often do we come from a belief system that sabotages us, that takes us away from what we say we really want? Because remember, intelligence is not responding to our words. Intelligence is responding to our whole being, and mostly the foundation of our whole being. So if we have a foundation that says, I'm ugly, my mother dresses me funny, I have no friends, and pretty soon I'll be grateful to be in downtown Atlanta, standing on a grate with warm air wafting up. Well, that may be a radical example, but how many of us have a belief that in some way is like that? I've discovered I did. It's looking at who we are and the very basis of our beliefs. I found out that I didn't really believe that things would really change. I really believed that. I was so frustrated with things from my family that I found that my sister got all these things and she got asked about it, and I didn't like the horse I wanted. She took the piano. I couldn't believe it. I found that out as an adult. But I wanted art lessons. Well, you didn't get that, but you could play the piano. I didn't think I could have what I wanted. Do you ever realize what you really think about something? But it can be like a fish in the ocean who says, what water? Because we're in it so much that we don't even realize we believe it or think it. I started changing when I came to this church, and I started letting go of some things. And I started looking at Bible belief, and I started having affirmations. I said that every step I took was padded by the wings of angels. Whatever angels are, they can be friends, circumstances, a book, whatever. But I wanted some change in my life, but I consciously didn't know how to do it. But I was taking these classes, and I thought, well, let's try this. And I did. I didn't know how to do things, but I don't have to. The way that it is made possible is not my job. That is the energy fields. When I start outlining, I'm probably really tamping down that flow of the good I can receive. You know, I just started realizing and telling myself to realize every time I thought a thought in opposition to my desire. And what amazed me was the hundreds of times a day that I was negating what I really wanted. I just didn't believe I could have it. You know, I took it step by step, and I conditioned myself to what we do call affirmative prayer, spiritual mind treatment. And I used to get up and go to work really early. I was a teacher, and I started the car, udding, and I said, there's one God. And I treated all the way to work. Oh, I watched my driving, but I was treating. And I did it very clearly and deliberately. I did it so much that once someone was in the car with me, and I started the thing. I said, there's one God. And they said, what? I said, nothing. You know, we just need to get in touch with what we want, don't we? You know, I'm reminded of that biblical phrase that says, become as little children. While we may act childish, the thought of little children means without doubt. They come in speaking. Doubt is learned. It doesn't come standard options, you know. So there was a friend of mine, this little boy, and the younger child had gotten chicken pox. It went through the whole expected, route that you could just look up in a textbook in the incubation. And then the son, who's a little older, came up with it. And he was covered with sores. I mean, covered with sores. And she had taken him over to her mother's, and she got off school and went and picked him up. And he didn't wake up. She was carrying him in her arms, and she was a little concerned. She took him and put him in bed at home. And she went back in later on to check on him. He said, Mom, I'm fine. I'm just going to sleep till this is over. I like to do that too sometimes. Wouldn't you just sleep and then you woke up and everything was over? And you felt rested and relaxed? Well, the fact is, what she said to herself, well, at least he's coherent, because his fever was high. And so she went to bed, and about 2 o'clock in the morning, Mom, thinking, oh my God, he's worse. And he said, turn on the light. She said, Max, what is it? He said, turn on the light. And she turned on the light. He was standing there, not a sore on him, but just a couple of little red dots. She has a master's in science. She and her husband are both agnostics and very highly trained in technology and science. And all she said to her husband was, I got to tell Susan about this. I can't, that's that stuff she does. I got to tell her. That 5-year-old at the time made them really rethink things. It was Max's faith. It was his faith and his unwavering commitment, his action. I'm just going to let this go because it's taken care of. I don't think he thought, oh, gosh, I'll wake up at 1 o'clock in the morning and scare my parents half to death and go in. And so he didn't think of any of that. He just woke up and it was done. That's faith. That's faith. Now, when we look at this, what do you do if you don't have faith in something? Well, I'm just not convinced that this is going to happen. I don't know how in the world it can happen. There's so many reasons why. Listen to what we're saying. And you know what the intelligence says to us? Let's say it together. Yea and verily. Oh, that was weak. Yea and verily, which means, okay, you got it times 100. So we start changing our thinking. And what we have to do is look for every little thing that happens that is going to be supportive. I remember one time I decided I wanted a teal sofa. Why I decided that, I'm not sure, but I did. And so I started noticing all these teal cars around me when I was driving. And I thought, whoa, I wonder if a teal sofa's going to drive by too. I'll go get it. But, the fact of the matter is, it's that law of attraction. Things start coming in. So welcome everything that helps you to understand that it is working. Celebrate it. Don't go, oh, that's not it. It can't be. Yes, it can. It's the spiritual law. And laws are laws. If they have exceptions, they're not laws. So the rest of the world will frequently stand by you, ever eager to discourage you and tell you you're ridiculous for your beliefs, and pay them no mind. I'm serious. Pay them no mind. I'm not talking about an egotistical kind of, oh, I can do this, don't tell me anything. The one times I've done that, let me tell you, it ended up with some very different outcomes than I expected. But I'm talking about going into the deepest self, getting clear that you know it on a cellular basis, that there's a way to do this, and that way comes clear to us now. So when you want to have faith, start affirming your faith. I would make a suggestion, unlike what I actually practice, which is take a small event in your life. Not the biggest thing, because when you treat for something, when you affirm something, what is in opposition to it is going to come up for you to release it so you can have it. So you change your energetic frequencies. So when you choose the biggest thing in your life, how much stuff do you think is going to come up? I mean, really, it feels like a tsunami, or who got that truck that rolled over me during the night? It does. And it's not very fun, And then there are those people who you think would support you that don't. And they tell you you're wrong. Pay them no mind. Because we live in an orderly universe that operates by laws we can use. Focus on your goal. Your thought is creative. If I put up a sign, and I did this before, focus on your goal. Because how many times do I like, ooh, there's a dime on the floor, so shiny, look at this, look at that, look at the other. And I got away from what I said I really wanted. And I'm reminded of a time I introduced two women who were both international consultants for big firms, like Price Waterhouse and those types of things. And I took them to lunch. And they met each other. They were comparing their experiences. And one of them said, oh, I really have to move to another location for the next step in my career. And the other one said, well, where are you going? She said, I don't know. I'm not ready yet. And she said, well, why aren't you ready? And she started saying, I don't want to leave my family. I got my house here. And the other woman looked at her and said, look, you have a secondary agenda that's driving you. You don't want to make partner nearly as much as you don't want to be uncomfortable, do you? And I thought, whoa, I needed to hear that. How often are we saying yes to something? I used to have, when stress hit the fan, I had an M&M and Tab at that time diet that was certainly designed for health. That when the fertilizer hit the ventilator, there I was, chugging down a pack of M&Ms. You'd think sometimes at 3 o'clock when school got out, I was going to take an axe to the snack machine if it had gotten broken or was out of change. Because that was my default. That's what I learned. Chocolate has caffeine, it has feel good, it has sugar in it. There's a lot of things to like there. And I cannot say that if it had been differently, I might have been an alcoholic or a drug addict. Those things don't appeal to me, but chocolate sure does. And I had to look at that. What do I really want? Do I really want to just sit around and eat chocolate, or do I want to be healthier? This is not a healthy way to live. You put it out there. I put it out there. And it's not just by saying, it's by thinking and feeling. And it goes out to the universe and returns to us as our circumstances. When we come from a fearful place, we're going to get lots more to be fearful about. It's going to come across louder than anything else. We can speak our truth and give it over in faith that this works and watch the result. Faith through commitment is a very powerful statement. When you feel alone, when you feel alienated or questioned, remember this. You and I are never alone. We are never, ever alone. You have never been alone. You never will be. And the same for me. You commit, and intelligence will show the way. All you have to do is take the first step. the first step can be shown to you. Affirm it. What I need to do is as clear as writing on the wall, I say to myself, and then it is. When I'm going like, I don't know what this is. I don't know. I could know a fourth of what I know on Monday by Thursday if I keep saying I don't know. Because the universe just says yes. You know, you think about it. Haven't we all put our faith in something that really wasn't going to give us what we wanted, like a job or a relationship or a particular diagnosis from a doctor? I know I have, and it was not serving me. And it just wasn't fun, the results. Because if I didn't have that whatever it was, believe you me, I was smashing the snack machine in, getting the chocolate because it made me feel better. We all have our ways of doing it. You just have to take the first step. If you think your good comes from a paycheck, then it does. Because God will just say yes. When you want security, why not go for the real thing? The place that makes the facts. The place that makes this universe. Well, if you don't believe it, it's going to act just like you believe it's not going to seem to work. Does that make sense to y'all? If you say it's not going to work, it says, okay, yea and verily, I won't work for that. And then, of course, I told you it didn't work. Really. The kingdom in heaven, we are told, is at hand and it is within. The kingdom of heaven is at hand and it is within. It is a state of consciousness. Thomas Edison was quite a character. His father beat him in public for his behavior. Those beatings today would get you put in jail. So I can imagine that his father would have been arrested. Edison could have taken many turns in his life. The prisons are filled with people who are behavior and learning disordered. They cope the best way they can to the best of their understanding. So Thomas Alva Edison didn't have to go on and invent lights that changed our lives. He could have done many things. And if he had done one of those things that we would consider unacceptable, we could probably really understand why he did it when we look at the circumstance of his life. While Edison did do some things mighty queerly, as they called him, he also gave us wonderful things. He brought us the light, didn't he? And isn't that what we say we want? I want to be enlightened. I want to see the light. I want to feel light in my body. And he brought light. He made it possible for it to be available to everyone. What makes any of us different from Edison? Or some of the people that we know, Beethoven, Whoopi Goldberg, whoever. You think, and these are names I'm saying because you know them, because you might say, I have such a different personality, I don't know those things. Well, the truth is, spiritually, nothing is different for you than it is for any of those people I just mentioned. We all have equal access to use this power, and we're using it all the time. Using it consciously and directing it is a whole different story. It's postulated that Beethoven's deafness came because his father beat him around the head. And being deaf, he still wrote those beautiful symphonies. His father was an alcoholic, I imagine. He had some alcoholic rages and committed that. Albert Einstein failed Algebra 1, and some of you are thinking, well, that's easy to do. But he failed Algebra 1. He was a so-so student, and he hated the Nazis, and then they went and confiscated his home when he was not there and turned it into an Aryan youth camp. That was so awful for him, and yet look what he did. And Whoopi Goldberg was not a good student. Let's say she did poorly in school. She was on welfare. She's had one-woman shows. She's known internationally. I don't think she's hurting for any money today. But the one thing that's different from some of us, for these people, I knew what I was saying right there. What makes us different from some of those people is that they got very committed to an idea, a belief system, and they got to do what it takes. It's not that you get this idea and you're so rigid. is to be flowing and flexible and see what happens and let it come to you. It'll happen naturally. You might say, that couldn't be the result of my prayer because it's just da-da-da. No, that's a result of prayer. You know, they followed through. They stuck with their beliefs, and it worked. They said yes to the cosmos, and the universe said yes to them. We need to be creative. That is our nature. You ever been around somebody who stopped creating? They are miserable to be around. And haven't we been some of those people sometimes that you just don't feel that urge? There's something that's missing. Well, we're not creating. It's been said there's nothing worse than a metaphysician who's not producing because they know the way. Of course, that's they, never me or you. But, circumstances rose up to meet these people, those who are the committed. They've risen up to meet me many times. I have tons of examples I could give, but I'll wait on that. But I'm sure you have some of the things too. There's something that just couldn't have worked out the way you did, and yet this happened and that happened and the other happened, and you look back later, it came all together and created something. So you have to ask yourself, I have to ask myself, what am I committed to today? What is my real commitment? And as we call in a new senior minister, what is our commitment as a community? Are we here to really support him or her? Are we really here to support the people who are carrying us through this transition, people? Do we really appreciate all that's done? Am I a person who commits to be a joyous creation? Am I a person who expects it to flow easily? Sometimes not. Do I expect my prayers to be answered? Yeah, I do. Look for the little things and then watch the bigger things. Because when I look at my life and I look at you, I see endless possibility. In physics, perfect potentiality. I see the future when I look at every one of you, each of you, truly, and know the ways we can change this world. After all, about 2,000 years ago, one uneducated man joined with these 12 vagabonds, and look what they created in the world today. It's never been the same. You know what I mean. So what we can do with our resources, our education, our technology, and spiritual understanding is unlimited. And I invite you to join me today to say to yourself, I can, I do, not I will, because God will say, oh yeah, and you will it more tomorrow. But right here, right now, we can redirect the focus of our thoughts and emotions, our lives, our communities. When people tell you the world's going to hell in a handbasket, then their world may be going to hell in a handbasket, but mine's not. Things happen that I could have never programmed. I just refocused. We will be using promises we have been given. We are using promises given in all the great religions. We'll still be human. We'll probably still have setbacks and doubts. But in response, we can commit to recommit every day to what it is we truly want. Strengthen our faith and live from that strength, because the infinite will only say yes. And I invite you to go ahead and do it, because it's simple and it's wonderful, and so are you, and so it is.